In today's show, I'm receiving Allegra Kowalewski-Ferreira. She's a partner at Breakthrough Energy Europe. We speak in depth about the world's largest climate tech fund, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, their historical background, their structuring, the actual role of Bill Gates and whether he makes decisions or participate in the investment committee, the cultural differences between the US and Europe, and whether a fund of this size should engage in active lobbying to help push the green agenda. Awesome interview. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Allegra, it's a great pleasure to have you on Climate Insiders. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I would like to understand, and probably it's a good point to start. Most people expect Breakthrough Energy to be an enormous fund, a huge corporate office, dozens of PhDs and researchers working in dark rooms, but you're actually living on your own in Brussels, piloting a remote first tiny team of 4, I believe. Can you paint us the daily life of a partner at Breakthrough Energy Ventures?
Oh, wow. So at the end of the day, as you know, climate is a global issue. Given that nobody suffers from the not invented here syndrome, and that we seek the best solution in order to hopefully get to net zero in due time, we're forced to acknowledge that we also need to do something in Europe, and then at some point, hopefully also in Asia and Africa and so on. So with that in mind, basically, it's actually Bill Gates, so the founder of Breakthrough Energy, who gave that impulse, I would say, to set up also an activity in Europe. And so, as you know, Breakthrough Energy is more than just investing in disruptive technologies. We have other activities throughout the lifetime of a company. And so each of those are also replicated in Europe. But if you're talking more specifically about Breakthrough Energy Ventures Europe, which is the daughter vehicle of Breakthrough Energy Ventures US, it's exactly the same thing, only it's smaller and dedicated to Europe only. So we work day to day with the rest of the partnership based out of the US. So the 4 of us do have long hours at night, given the time difference. But we invest, I would say, according to the same processes. We work on a day to day basis with the American colleagues. We're just boots on the ground in Europe. But other than that, I would say that the discipline and the threshold that we have regarding impact remains the same. The scope and the way we have, I would say, divided the economy in order to decarbonize each sector remains the same. The processes are the same. It's just a geographical scope because at the end of the day, there are, I think, cultural differences between US and Europe. And you do need, I would say, boots on the ground if you want to play your role correctly as a venture investor. You need to be close to the entrepreneurs. You need to help them out, and that is a bit more difficult if you're a partner on the West Coast to work with, I don't know, a Danish entrepreneur, for instance. So that's the reason.
Yeah, no. So there's a Breakthrough Energy Ventures US. I believe it's Fund 3 by now, and you can kind of give us where the Breakthrough Energy Ventures Europe is at. How many millions do you have under management? And this is Fund 1, I guess, for you.
Yeah. So indeed, in the US, we started in 2015, 2016 with a $1 billion fund. Then there was a vintage number 2 with 1.2 billion. We're about to launch the third vintage, which is going to be in the same logic and mindset and investment mandate that the first 2. And then you have the daughter vehicle, Breakthrough Energy Ventures Europe, which has 100 million euros under management. And so basically our LPs are, on the one hand, the 2 first vintages that I just mentioned, and then European Investment Bank. So these are the LPs of the daughter vehicle in Europe.
I see. And is the goal to scale to $1 billion in Europe as well, or it seems unrealistic?
I certainly hope so. So I guess that the reason why we structure a smaller fund to begin with was a little bit to see how it would work out with the European Investment Bank, which is, I would say, a very peculiar kind of animal in terms of LP, especially in a structure where we are 50-50. So they weigh fairly quite a bit on the documentation and so on, given that they are 50% LP on the European fund. But yeah, obviously, Europe has the same issue regarding climate change. At the end of the day, there's a certain number of things that are a little bit more advanced actually in Europe. And so we absolutely need to leverage that in order to make it happen.
Yeah, and so you and I were speaking about the cultural differences, but also within the team. But it is very much two technical and different legal entities, but you are under the same umbrella. So you share resources, deal flow, you help each other out, you go on retreats together. It is very much of one team.
Exactly. So it's one team, several vehicles. And so this is the way we basically operate. So we'll look at climate problem. We split the economy into 5 verticals. We articulate thesis for each of those in order to have kind of a ranking of the different technical approaches that could help to solve those climate issues. And then that get disseminated throughout the team, and whether we're going to find, I don't know, an Israeli company that is going to solve the issue of producing low-cost hydrogen, or we're going to find an American company that is going to do battery recycling, so be it. That's the way we work.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to get to that. I want to definitely drill down into certain categories that you double click on. Just a little anecdote before that. I started my first startup in Kenya. And as a matter of fact, we raised funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation back in 2015, which in my view is almost the predecessor of Breakthrough Energy Ventures. Different scope and focus, but probably they planted the seed in Bill Gates' mind to start Breakthrough. And after stepping down from my startup, my dream was to work for Breakthrough Energy. That was in 2017. And so it looked so shiny and impressive from the outside. But boy, was it hard to get in touch with the Breakthrough team. And it still is, in my opinion. So I cold emailed, I pinged everyone on LinkedIn. I'm kind of that guy that you hate, right? That just kind of sends the cold emails. And the only person that accepted to jump on a meeting was Tim Heidel, which I say hi, by the way, if he's listening. So why does Breakthrough look from the outside as this impenetrable fortress? Is it by design? Is it the culture, or it just happened?
No. And to be honest, I had the same experience when I applied. So basically, I really wanted to join. So I've been an entrepreneur. I've been in venture capital for 10 years, and I wanted to do something in climate. So at the time, I looked at the markets like, the holy grail is basically Breakthrough Energy Ventures, because it has all those different programs, because it's established to last 20 years, because they have PhDs on the team. But obviously, I didn't have exactly the perfect pedigree in terms of what they were looking for. So they're looking for former entrepreneurs with exit with 9 figures, or people with a PhD and an industrial experience that they could put to good use in the framework of our technical due diligence. I had neither of those. So I've hit a wall as well. So indeed, I think that this is something that we truly need to improve, to be honest with you. This is something that I'm working on as much as I can in order to troubleshoot that issue. It's just the consequence of the fact that we have now 110 portfolio companies, and everybody is extremely busy. So it's don't take it personally, so to speak.
Yes.
I've been there.
And entrepreneurs that also apply to Breakthrough, they face the same. So don't take it personally. They're just very busy.
But we're getting better. There's still is room for improvement. I hear you loud and clear. That's completely true, and I couldn't agree more. But we're getting better also because we have added all those different programs. So you have fellows, for instance, which is really for lab scale kind of project. And so that team is giving out grants, so subsidy, non-dilutive capital for those super early stage before TRL4 kind of a project. So that is also helping with declogging, I would say, the funnel. And on the other hand of the spectrum, we also have Catalyst now. And so Catalyst is for, let's say, funding first of a kind plant. The issue with those is that typically you're gonna suffer from a green premium that nobody wants to fund. But at the end of the day, if you truly want to go through the cost curve, well, you have to start somewhere. And so Catalyst purpose is to fund, I would say, that green premium in a first of a kind plant. So we're getting better because the ecosystem is also larger. We have more colleagues in the breakthrough energy universe. And so hopefully we're getting a little bit better at getting back to entrepreneurs, co-investors, and other people, and I would say like-minded people in the ecosystem.
So you mentioned, so there's the fellowship program, Breakthrough Energy Fellowship, which is a separate entity. They have their own budget, they have their own runway. Then the ventures arm, which is the VC arm, and then Catalyst as also another entity. Is that correct?
So basically, you have Breakthrough Energy, which is a nonprofit organization where you have a number of different activities. So you have fellows, you have Catalyst, you have advocacy, so everything that pertains to voicing the concerns of the VC community and what needs to change from a policy standpoint in order to, well, make it happen, so to speak. All of this is nonprofit and is host within an umbrella organization, which is Breakthrough Energy, which has Bill Gates for founder. And in the middle, so to speak, if you were to look at the company technologic maturity, you have the venture program, which is for profit. So indeed, it's lodged into a different entity for that reason.
I see. But wait a minute, I don't want to lose the track of the previous conversation, because you said you didn't have the pedigree, you also struggled like anyone else. So everyone listening is probably saying, how on earth did you land that partner role at Breakthrough? Any tip there? How can someone land this kind of dream job?
I guess that well, a little bit of luck in terms of timing. Certainly a healthy dose of perseverance. I had made my decision that I wanted to join Breakthrough, so at any cost, I was ready to make it happen.
Ready to kill?
I was maybe not that far, but no, I was lucky enough, I would say, to get in touch with them just before they were about to set up the European venture, and so they needed people with boots on the ground. But yet, when they started off Breakthrough Energy Ventures Europe, because I didn't have the pedigree, I didn't fit, I would say, the profile that EIB was expecting. So this is at that point that they hired Gaëtan Bonhomme, who's my colleague in Paris. And so Gaëtan has a PhD in material science. He was the co-founder of Curion, which is a nuclear waste management company that he sold off for a couple of hundreds of millions to Veolia, which is a pretty sizable exit. And so he did fit the pedigree and the profile that EIB and wanted to see. So they hired him first. And then at some point, Gaëtan was, well, actually, I need somebody else. I'm struggling here. And this is where I came in. So it was, I guess, pure opportunism. I was lucky enough that Gaëtan raised his hand saying, well, I'm genuine in my intention, but I mean, I have only two hands and there's only 24 hours in the day. So please get somebody else on the European team because it's just too much to do.
I mean, you're underselling yourself because you had something special. And at Climentum Capital, we struggle to find partners, partner level qualified people. I mean, you do have the track. You've been in VC for 10 years. You have the obsession for climate. You also sit in the middle of the nebula, right, in Brussels, which also helps probably with EIB and the European institutions. So you had what it takes. Awesome.
Yeah,
And
I guess they ended up seeing that.
yeah. Well, congrats for being here and doing such a good job. So I wanted to also double click on what you said. Bill Gates is kind of the shadow man, kind of pulling the strings, but how actually involved is he in the investment decision process? Or, does he need to provide his okay and stamp of approval on every deal, or is just the rainmaker?
So Bill Gates within the venture entity, he's an anchor investor. He is not the sole investor of Breakthrough Energy Ventures. And so as such, he has the same, I would say, um, responsibility and obligation as any LP.
Mm-hmm.
We're very grateful for him because otherwise we wouldn't exist, obviously. And to be honest, the strength of Breakthrough is in all the other, I would say, solution and programs that he has launched and that he is funding. I would say that he is very much involved in any way he can. He's super impressive in terms of the memory. So you give him a memo of the, I don't know, 500 companies that we have screened on the first quarter. He actually reads that and it
Mm-hmm.
actually sinks in. So he's going to ask a very specific question about, so why did you, for instance, put that aside? What did you think of this one? So it's mind blowing, to be honest, to
Yeah, the
interact
man is
with
a machine.
the
We've
man
seen
is
that on
machine.
Netflix. Yeah.
And he is, I would say that while he's putting his position, his reputation at use. So he's doing a lot of trips in order to meet with dignitaries, with policymakers, to advocate in the direction of, okay, we need, I don't know, a critical minerals program. We need subsidies in order to recycle batteries. I don't know. We need to think about what are we going to do with our waste. And so he does use his reputation both in the US, in Europe, and elsewhere in order to, well, try to make progress in the right direction, make the needle move as much as possible. And it's true that, well, he has access that we don't have individually, let's be honest.
I mean, it does have a reputation and access. And in terms of investment committee, this is also a question that's recurring, right, in the climate tech world. Most VC funds are trying to structure it in the most optimal way. So knowing that you have such a enormous anchor LP, and he also wants to dig into every case, or at least learn a lot, is he actually involved in the investment committee, or what is the structure internally? And also knowing that you share the same team, but you have different vehicles. Anything you could
Um,
share?
so the investment committee, he's not involved. It's made out of two people, which hopefully makes us agile and nimble enough at decision making when we get to that point. And so we have a little bit, I would say, the way I simplify it is that we have one person in charge of technology, impact, IP, R&D roadmap. How are you going to mitigate how are you going to get to the technical milestones that you still have to meet and so on. And so that Eric Toon, and the man is just, I was going to say in French, un puits de science. It's really humbling to be working with Eric Toon because the extent of his knowledge is really amazing. So Eric is going to be about the impact thesis, about the technology, what is disruptive, the mechanism of impact. How do we get to an economic equation that makes sense? Because you can have on paper a technology that is super disruptive. If it remains twice as expensive as the rest, well, nobody is going to buy it, nobody is going to adopt it, and so you won't get the impact that you seek in the first place, and you won't get to profitability either. So from a venture perspective, you're kind of screwed. So that's Eric. And then we have Carmichael Roberts, who's a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur by background. He's also, technically speaking, super strong, to be honest. But he then, I would say, focused a little bit more on the other aspect of a venture. So the ambition of the entrepreneurs, the track record, the cultural mindset of the team, the business model, the financial terms. So all of the other aspects that Eric don't necessarily cover. And so with those two, typically we get to a point where we can get to a decision at the IC level. But so Bill Gates is not at the investment committee. He is obviously sitting at the board of directors of the organization. And whenever he needs, we obviously provide, I would say, a memo. Let's say, I don't know, tomorrow he goes to Spain to discuss hydrogen strategy. Well, we're going to write a memo about, okay, so this is our thesis. These are the investment that we have already done. These are the ones that we would like to do in order to complete the picture. And he's going to leverage those insights in order to, get the ball moving in the right direction.
I see. That's a bit of an unusual structure, and in a way inspiring, because we find most funds rely on the shoulders of their partners, right? A partner by default, or a founding partner by default, is on the investment committee, and this is where there's a bit of an ego friction, right? So you kind of need to preserve your seat. But it seems like your structuring is more meritocratic. You identify two guys that sit at the top that filters and use their intelligence to make the final call, and the rest of the partnership is really working hand in hand to submit the best possible proposals.
Yeah.
Would you say that it's actually an even better structure to have independent minds that are just the best, to make the final shots?
Well, I like it very, very much. Then it forces us also as partners to, as you say, to come up with filtered kind of opportunities, because the time with the IC is kind of precious. And so we need to organize ourselves accordingly in order to make it work.
Yeah, no, it's super inspiring. Great to know that. And initially, Breakthrough was also designed to fill the gaps. So back in the days in 2015, when I spoke to Tim, generalist funds were not invested in climate or not in hardware deep tech. Now we definitely have a lot more of those funds. It's a specialist in climate. But obviously that must have changed. So you've heavily deployed in startups that might overlap in certain sectors like carbon capture, fusion, hydrogen. When do you decide to invest again in those sectors? And or do you have a bit of a rule where you would not invest in two potential competitors, or as long as there's any kind of overlap?
So usually the problems that we target are by definition large enough, because for us to make an investment, we need to see the case for 0.5 gigatons of CO2 emission being mitigated every year by the time the technology would have scaled. So this is not something that we expect at the gate. But so that requires typically disruptive technology rather than an incremental improvement. And that requires a fairly large addressable market. I mean, if you have a disruptive technology that is addressing the need of a niche market, we don't get to 1% of greenhouse gas emission being mitigated. And so because of that, there's room for more than one startup to approach and to address that climate issue. So we have I would say we have enough room on the market to make several bets for the same issue. And so, for instance, what you said about direct air capture is a good example. We have several of those bets. What we do pay attention to is to make sure that a technological approach is indeed differentiated. So they might compete regarding to the end market, but that end market is big enough to welcome several ventures. The only thing is that they don't compete on technology. So they have different technology approach in order to solve the same issue. And so this is the way we think about it. And yeah, I mean, hydrogen is the same issue. We need to get to well below $2 a kilo of green hydrogen produced, and that needs to be produced in a variety of different hubs with different electricity price and so on. So again, there's room for more than a startup. And also, I mean, if we do get, let's say, at $1 a kilo of green hydrogen, then the market is so big that again you have access to I mean, you have the room and opportunity for more than one or two companies to become profitable and to make it work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it takes me to the question is Breakthrough structured as with a performance mind where you need to optimize for returns or more impact? So on a given case, you're always going to think about impact first, regardless of its potential performance profile, or you kind of have to justify, does that fit that fund lifetime and this will return enough in the next 10 plus 2 years? Or
So I would say that impact is very much integrated in everything that we do. So it's kind of a first filter that we use. If we don't see the case for zero point 0.5 gigaton, we don't engage in due diligence. And to be honest with you, this is usually reason number one for us declining to engage.
yeah,
And then I would say we behave like another venture capital firm. So we do need to see the case for returns that are commensurated with the amount of risk that we take. The only thing is that I would say that return is calculated in multiple of invested money rather than in RRR. Reason being that we're patient investor structured to last 20 years. And for that reason, if you have to compute in RRR, it becomes mathematically a little bit more complicated. But we have, I would say,
yeah.
the same ambition and requirement regarding return potential than any other VC firm on our companies.
And since you're one of the few funds that have been going through a full cycle, right? So you've seen bull and bear, and you have enough years of existence to start deriving interesting data. Anything you could share on the actual performance of Fund One? What are we looking at?
Um, That's tough because at this point in time, well, there's a lot, to be honest with you, that is theoretical. It's just the process of, okay, where is the valuation now of the past rounds? And I mean, until you have an actual exit, that's the moment where you can actually measure performance. So we have only a handful of companies that went public. And so there you can see where is the quote at the moment. But for the rest, to be honest, it's completely theoretical.
Yeah, I do actually. I've done a bit of research, and out of 110 portfolio companies, you've had 5 exits. At least that's what's been publicly communicated. QuantumScape, which went
Yep.
acquired as a SPAC,
Yep.
IonQ IPO, then Excel Energy IPO, ESS IPO, and then 1336, which was acquired. Which is pretty awesome because it gives us as an industry some benchmark, right? It is definitely possible to IPO. You can get acquired via SPAC or different acquisitions. It's not fairyland. We're not telling lies here. It is absolutely doable. And also, I think it shocked everyone how quick, right? It was quicker than anticipated because your breakthrough was initially, setting a target, a milestone 20 years out, but this happened much quicker than anyone anticipated. Would you agree?
No, that's true. That was before I joined for most of the companies that you mentioned, but definitely I think that I mean those IPOs or going to public market materialized much earlier than anybody expected. But yeah, we're not here to I would say um, uh, reduce the pace of any of those companies. Quite the contrary, we're trying to act as a catalyst. So if there's such opportunity that allow the company to raise more money to deploy its solution as quickly as possible, well, we're all for that, and we're going to be in support.
Yeah, for sure. Another question is the kind of support. I find that there's in climate tech, you mentioned first of a kind hardware startups that require enormous funding so they can demonstrate, for first facility, so they can then attract other kinds of funding, private equity, growth capital, et cetera, et cetera. And most often, it requires quite a bit of a hands-on approach, right, as a venture capital. I was wondering whether Breakthrough takes that hands-on approach where you provide a huge amount of help to founders, be it strategic, resources, market research, opening doors, you name it, or whether you were pretty hands-off.
No. So coming back to your earlier comments regarding the availability of the team members, we're extremely hands-on. So I say that generally VCs tend to provide strategic guidance, board participation, help with recruitment. So there's a handful of things that a standard VC fund tend to do. We do all that. And on top of it, we try to add to that a certain number of things that is specific to the resources that we have access to. So one is, for instance, technological advisory, because we have people with, I would say, a scientific background, a PhD, industrial kind of experience, and so on. They can really go deep into a R&D roadmap and try to troubleshoot it whenever it's needed. So this is something that I would say is different from other VC firms that we try to provide. The other is what I mentioned before about advocacy. So we also, I would say, create the bridge with the other teams and programs within the breakthrough energy ecosystem. And again, that takes time. But for instance, if you want to help European entrepreneur to tap into a public funding tool, well, sometimes it feels like you need a PhD in order to get there because it's really complex.
Yeah.
And so we make the bridge with the advocacy team that can put you in front of the president of EIF or EIB. And so this is what we try as much as possible to do.
And you're one of those funds that has the critical mass, right? Critical size, where you could technically fund a startup all the way to IPO virtually, right? And I believe you do invest at really early stage, pre-seed, and all the way to Series B and C. Are you stringent on valuations, or is this something that you're very disciplined on and say, this is overvalued, or it doesn't matter? It's all about how transformative this can get.
So there's no one fits all on that answer, because I think that there's different sensibilities. If you were to compare one partner to the other, having boots on the ground in Europe, I would say that they're a bit more rational when it comes to valuation than some of my American colleagues. Although I do have to acknowledge that, sometimes we do come across businesses that are truly transformative for our society as a whole. So CFS is a good example. I mean, if Fusion could provide us with,
Fusion, yeah.
So, I mean, that company raised a year ago? I think they raised a bit more than $1 billion. Well, obviously, if you want the entrepreneurs to be left with something somehow significant in the capital, and you also want to reflect on the fact that technology could be truly transformative, well, you have a valuation that is pretty enormous as well. But so it's at the end of the day, I think that in general, valuation in venture capital is more an art than a science, to be honest.
I'm glad to hear it from you.
So yeah, it's always a discussion. I think that cultural differences are a little bit more at play here, where Americans tend to take more risk on that front than Europeans do. Although it changes a little bit in Europe, we have come across a number of entrepreneurs that dare to ask for pretty high valuation, kind of, not so sure you're there yet.
Yeah.
But
the ambition is shining.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, we need European entrepreneurs to voice the ambition a little bit more clearly. I think it's just that they have to do the whole package in terms of ambition, not just on the valuation, if it's possible.
Yeah. Actually, well, let's speak about the European versus US cultural differences. Anything else that strikes you as a recurring, where you need to brief and support and mentor the European founders a bit more?
We are really, really, really bad at pitching. Really, I'm going to say it simply, we suck at pitching. We need to get really better at that because we don't speak the same language as the American, and that hurts us. And that's really a shame because the pool of entrepreneurs we have in Europe are just as good as the one that we see in North America. Science is equally as good. Another point is that, for instance, in the United States, they have a few hubs in terms of universities and incubators and so on. And so I mean, you know what you get when you talk to an entrepreneur coming out of MIT or Stanford and so
Mhm.
on. In Europe, it's much more scattered. It doesn't mean that any of them are bad at it. It's just that it's more difficult to keep track of the reputation and the level of scientific innovation of, I don't know, let's say 30 universities across Europe than 4 in the United States. And so that's another thing where it's just too bad because we don't um, shine like the Americans do.
Actually, you know what? I've been noodling on this question for so long because I lived 6 years in the States, came back to Europe, and there was a striking fact, the fact that we're so bad at marketing and storytelling. And it is a culture, it's a profound cultural difference, but it also boils down to in the US, when you grew up, you have storytelling all over you, right? From Hollywood to books, to movies and songs and everything that surrounds you. It is so culturally entrenched. We don't really have that in Europe, but it is a muscle, and in a
Mhm.
muscle that you can definitely work out on, right? You can practice, you can get better at it. I think we just need to accept that we're terrible, and then there has to be a pathway, right? So venture, I insist on this all the time, and I only by now invest in founders that I feel like can be coached, right? They might be a 3 or 4 out of 10 on storytelling, but they can get to 8 pretty quickly
Yeah,
because they need to
absolutely.
lay out the crisp vision, the macro milestones. They need to tell you a story of how this industry is going to develop over the next 5 to 10 years. If they do not have that, it's almost it's an uphill battle and very difficult to overcome.
Absolutely. And the thing is that sometimes entrepreneurs are, to be honest, we come across European entrepreneurs that are geniuses,
Yeah,
but they don't articulate and voice their thought leadership. So exactly what you said, how am I going through that innovation, transform a whole industry?
yeah,
And that tends to be missing from the European pitch, which is too bad because it's exactly what the Americans wants to hear. It's much more about this is when I want to go. The way you're going to get there is a little bit less important for the Americans, and Europeans tend to say, "Well, I've done so far. I'm here, and I would like a little bit of money to get there." And the American, all he wants to hear is, "How do I get on the other side of the quadrant?" And yeah, so
true.
and I think this is completely fixable. It's fairly easy. I mean, you just pitch your parents, pitch your friend until you get there.
But you need people that are also kind of tuned to it, right? They can provide very
True.
good feedback. If you picture a mom, I'm pretty sure she's probably the wrong audience. She's just going to nod at whatever you say. And another point is within Europe, so there are cultural differences too, right? So Belgium surprised me over the last couple of months because I heard a ton of non-dilutive funding from the Belgium government. Anything you can tell us about whether Belgium is catching up in this climate battle, or what is your opinion being a citizen?
I hope. I mean, there's I think that Belgium is realizing that the next revolution is a green one, and so
Hmm.
this is an opportunity to put back people at work, to reinvent itself a little bit. I mean, if you look at the staff of the country, we have more than 25% unemployment. Could we put those people
Really?
back to
Wow.
work with, for instance, installing heat pumps? So yeah, there's, I would say that policymakers are catching up with that opportunity now that we've been hit with natural gas prices since the war in Ukraine, and kind of realizing that all of this is, I would say, two sides of the same coin, and that at the end of the day, we can move to green energy while reinventing a little bit or re putting a little bit more dynamism in our economy. But I wouldn't expect Belgium to be at the forefront of anything. To be honest, we are
All
uh,
right. Hopefully they can
easygoing
ride along
people.
well, though. And the final question is really something that comes up as well. Most people, compare the political action of policy making versus venture versus entrepreneurship, right? So, are we going to solve this crisis with innovation, technological innovation, or with policy innovation? And because you're one of those bigger funds, you've reached critical mass, and you have the Bill Gates and the likes, in as a tailwind. Are you actively lobbying to push for new green reforms? Is something that it is in the DNA of your fund or not?
Absolutely. We need both, to be honest. Um, I mean, once you have the technology, but you don't have the process for permitting, that doesn't work. And you have the technology, but you don't have the business model, that doesn't work. So we absolutely need both. And this is something that we work daily on. So, for instance, the team working on advocacy in the US, they were very close to everybody working on IRA. And there's a certain number of, I would say, suggestions that came from us. And it's the same here in Europe. We have a variety of different programs. We work very closely with the European Commission. We have, for instance, tomorrow a workshop where we're going to put a number of entrepreneurs in front of policymakers so that they understand what are the hurdles that they face, and which policy innovation they actually need to see happening to be able to go to market and to deploy their technology at large.
Here. So it seems like as those funds in Europe scale to a critical size, they also need to get involved into lobbying, policy making, and try to push for reforms too.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks so much, Allegra. This has been an awesome conversation, super insightful to go backstage and learn more about Breakthrough. So thank you very much for coming on Climate Insiders.
Thank you very much for having me. And if you have any other questions, I promise I'll make myself available.
All right. Thanks so much. And to all of you, as always, thanks for tuning in.